Going here. Well, good morning to everybody joining us from all over Nova Scotia today. Um, we have a fun topic today, talking all about those pollinators and the bees that we see around outside. My name is Jeff. I'm a teacher and I'm working with Brilliant Labs here in the Halifax area.
And my name is Sarah, and I am the program director for Brilliant Labs Nova Scotia. And we're so very happy to have you with us today.
Yeah. So it's great to see a lot of teachers in our chat with us today. So what that means is if you choose to stay here, you can ask us questions. So you're welcome to just watch on YouTube and then pop back on here if you do have questions. But for the most part, just staying on YouTube is totally cool too. Because there's a bit of a sound delay as well, people have discovered.
Yeah.
So all right, well, let's jump into our topic here today. So just to get started, in Nova Scotia, it's kind of crazy to think about it, but we have 200 or over 200 different varieties of bees. I think of bees, I usually think of like honeybees or bumblebees. Oh, there's probably a delay on YouTube. Sorry, I got distracted. I saw a chat bubble pop up there.
Mhm.
We usually see like honeybees and bumblebees, but there are way more that are maybe a little harder to identify or look really similar. But there are many different types of bee species here in Nova Scotia and tens of thousands around the world. Um, so I went out and kind of like people go bird watching, I went bee watching. So I went outside to see if I could identify some different bees in my yard. So hopefully this shows clearly, but I found one. And then I tried to follow him around. So see if you can notice any features thinking about that picture of the honeybee and the bumblebee. There's a good picture there.
It's a really
All
good.
right.
You get really close to this little
Yeah.
guy.
I gave him a safe distance. Luckily, the
Yeah.
camera has a bit of zoom. All right, so I do have like a still photo of him too. So it's kind of fuzzy, but so this is the bee that I saw and I followed around. So if I'm thinking back to those two pictures, where'd it go?
And look at
Right
the
here.
size of him. So we all know what the size of a dandelion roughly is. He's a good like half size of that dandelion. So he's
Yeah,
really in.
he's a big bee, and
Mm.
I wasn't sure if he was a honeybee. Sir, do you have a prediction which one you thought it was?
Well, I think that looking at how just chubby he is and his legs, and he's not so long with the thorax on the honeybee, I'm gonna say he's a bumblebee.
That was my guess too, and I can't say for sure because there's 200 species in Nova
Yeah,
Scotia.
exactly.
But my best guess was that he was a bumblebee. So when we think about where bees live, oftentimes we think about or we picture like on a farm, they're in these boxes, and the farm there's like the bee farmer has these like sheets that the bees are making their honeycombs on, or maybe we picture it kind of like in the TV shows or the movies where there's this big nest hanging from a tree.
Yeah.
And those things happen, but oftentimes what is more in reality is that bees that are in a big hive or a large group are making their homes naturally in something like a hollowed out log. Or for many of our native bees here in Nova Scotia, that means bees that have always been here. They're more sedentary. Like they live more alone. They don't live in those huge groups. They live in smaller groups, or maybe even by themselves, and they live in holes in the ground. So to see a bee climbing into a little hole, or maybe even to be going into a larger hole that maybe looks like it was for a bigger animal, some bees will make their homes in a burrow from a different animal that doesn't live there anymore. So sometimes what looks like a little hole in the ground, if you went and you could see inside, there might actually be a lot more buzzing activity down in there.
I think that the bees are really creative in the way that they resource their habitat spaces because they're kind of upcycling or using areas that have obviously been pre-dug, so they don't have to use up that extra energy to do so. And of course, the animals have vacated the area so that they're able to move in. Very smart.
Very clever. Yeah. So many things about bees are so it just seems like just so ingenious. Like how do you like that they can do that on their own, or they've been doing it for thousands and tens of thousands of years. So this is a picture of that a local bee farmer sent me, and I thought it was really cool. I don't know if you guys can see my pointer or not, but inside these black cells, you can see these teeny tiny little gray, looks like a piece of rice in each one of those. And this is interesting to me because those are actually bee eggs. So the queen bee will lay an egg in each one of those cells, and that becomes the little protective space that the bee gets to grow its entire life, or life cycle, until it's an adult, I mean. So it's
Right.
growing up in there. So to think about that life cycle, how it goes from being that tiny little egg into a bee, something happens that we call a metamorphosis. It goes
Mm.
from something that looks one way to being totally different by the end of it, a complete change. So looking at how this starts, so here we are at the top at the egg, changing into what lots of insects kind of look like at the beginning stages as a larva, and how it changes into that pupa state where we start to see how it's going to look like a bee. And then finally, 21 days later, when it emerges from that little cell and it can fly away as an adult bee ready to go.
So much growing in such a little time. There's other insects out there who do a similar stages. I think the blowfly, the common fly that we see outside, usually around green bins and food waste, have a very similar timeline as far as going through the egg, the larva stage, and then to the pupa, and then continuing on. And it's roughly the same timeline, so it's really interesting.
Hmm. Interesting too. Well, so that's about like a 3-week process for them to become an adult. As an adult, bees depends on the type of bee and like their role in the hive, and male and female stuff too. But somewhere between 4 and 7 weeks is their adult life, and then the cycle starts over. So that bee would die, and then the new eggs would be, bringing on new bees all season.
And it's constantly going the whole time.
Yeah, I thought this image was kind of neat and worth showing
Yeah.
too. So it shows how in each little comb, it starts off as that tiny little egg, and just how it develops as it gets closer to adulthood. So I thought that was kind of cool.
It
Um,
really doesn't start looking like a bee.
oh, I lost you there, Sarah. Oh, she's gonna, maybe Sarah will pop back in here. So another topic we wanted to talk about today, and to kind of get you guys thinking about, is this idea of how humans and our activity impacts, or it has an effect on bees, and really what that ends up meaning is a lot of our food. They say that about 70% of all the fruits and vegetables that we grow only can do so because of pollinators like bees. So if we didn't have any bees at all, it's kind of funny to think about it that way, but without having the bees and those pollinators, we wouldn't have blueberries. We wouldn't have apples growing on trees. We wouldn't have, anything that grows a flower first before growing its fruit or its vegetable. Those things need pollinators almost in almost all cases. So thinking about farms here in Nova Scotia and what they need to be able to grow great foods for us, bees are a huge part of that. I grew up on an apple farm, and we used to have a local bee farmer would bring in boxes of bees, and he would let them go and pollinate all of the apple tree blossoms. And at the end of the season, we got tons of beautiful apples, and he got honey from his bees. So it was like a relationship that, something that his business needed, and it was something that our business needed. So it worked out really well. So thinking about the different kinds of things that can affect bees, because it's not just a problem in one place in the world, it's happening all over. So there's a few different things that are happening that we're hoping that we can kind of get you started thinking about, so that maybe we can do a little bit more research and find out what we can do as, as Nova Scotians and Canadians, to try and help the bee populations in the world, because they are really important to us. One of the things that's happening that's hurting the bees is when large farms are using pesticides, because there's a lot of little bugs that do hurt a farmer's crops. So they have to spray for them sometimes with products to get rid of those things, so that they don't eat up all the and ruin their crops. But in addition to that, they're also hurting the bees. How you doing, Sarah? You back?
I'm good. Slow internet at 9 o'clock
Internet
in
in
the
Nova
morning each
Scotia.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so there's so many a balance between trying to protect our food source, but without that, we wouldn't have the food source without having our pollinators.
Hmm. Just had a question pop up
Yeah.
from Miss Lloyd. Says there's a student wondering how it's possible for bees to fly since their wings are so small compared to the rest of their body. You know that? Do you have an answer right off for that one, Sarah?
Well, I do. I wonder that myself because of I think it really comes down to the design, the shape of the wings, and the way that their mass is distributed. Because you're right, like they have little tiny wings and such a big, fluffy body. But if you actually look at a bee with all the fuzz, it's not as large. Like when you have a cat or a dog and you take them to get groomed and you take all that puffy fur off, they are quite a bit smaller. So there is a bit of an illusion that they're that big, but the wings are actually designed in a way and with the way that the speed goes so that they can actually carry the weight. I know it looks like it's almost impossible.
And what makes it even more crazy is that they say that a bee can carry half of its own body weight in pollen and nectar. So so that's like you know, picturing is somebody that weighed 100 pounds carrying 50 pounds, so half their own body weight, carrying it around and then flying with it. Like
I know.
it's when you think of it, like it's a really heavy load. And you're right, to whoever the student was. It's a
Yeah,
interesting thing to think about how strong they really must be to be able to do that.
it has a lot to do with the way that their wings are actually grow and what the angle is of where they're situated. So
Hmm.
that they do, the hardest part for them to do is to get off of the where they are for the initial takeoff. And there's been a lot of studies about why that may be. But I think that they, over thousands and thousands of years, the bees have perfected the way to get up and moving. And once they are, it's a lot easier for them to stay in motion than it is for them to take off.
Thank you for the question, Miss Lloyd. That's great. So yeah, just we were talking about human impact on it. So pesticides is one thing that's happening to the bees. Another thing is humans are destroying natural habitats. So we know that there's something called deforestation. So that's when we're getting rid of forested areas and we're developing, towns or neighborhoods for people to live and things like that. And along with that development for us, or like how we see it as improvement, it's making it harder for a lot of animal and insect species that have to find new homes or new places to live or new ways to live because of it. And lastly, I'd be interested if somebody ended up doing some research on this. This one's not so much in our control, it seems initially, maybe. But there's also, just like you and I can get sick, it can also happen to bees. So it can be a bacteria can get into the hive, and it can make the bees sick, and they can end up dying off because of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting where they pick that bacteria up, and whether it has to do with the other animals and wildlife in the area, or if it's something that they pick up from the actual flowers and plants that they're pollinating. So we'd love to know a little bit more about that. If anybody out there wants to do some research and let us know.
And just one more, we talked last week about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So, just these 17 things that as a planet we are trying to work together, all the countries in the world coming together to try and solve some of these really big problems that are making it so that it's harder to live here on Earth. So, we're trying to fix those things. And one of them is about life on land. Um, so, thinking about climate change and how we are living here and all the different creatures that are affected by our choices, climate change is a big one for any living thing, especially the bees who are having trouble, with their population numbers. Numbers of bees are going down all over the world.
So I think we have a question in the chat there.
Yeah, we got lots of wing questions today. I should
Yeah,
have done more
no,
research on
yeah,
wings.
that's great. So what is that? Can a bee grow without? I think I saw that somewhere. Can
Can it be
bees
grow?
grow no wings? Yes, actually, that is something that happens from time to time. Unfortunately, it doesn't make their lifespan. It kind of shortens it in a way, and I'm not sure if that's actually physically or they just aren't able to get the food and nourishment or even do the duties that they're supposed to. So they can grow very, very rarely. I don't think it happens often with no wings, but then their place within the hive and the community isn't that necessary. So I'm not sure if that Mother Nature and biology lets them live as long as that full lifespan that we discussed.
Hmm. I love that the questions are popping in here.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a honeybee and a bumblebee? Yeah. So some of these questions I just want to kind of throw back at you guys to try and go out and figure these out. So yeah, when we looked at those pictures, they do look different. I did mention as well that where they live is different. So the bumblebees actually live in a hole in the ground. So they don't build those big nests like we see from the honeybees. But I know there's a lot of other things that if you did a little bit of searching, I know you could find some cool stuff that we would love to hear what you read about as well. If you can
Oh, it looks like we're losing
oh,
sound. Hopefully you can hear us. I just wanted to mention there was a question from it looks like Karina from Miss McKinnon's grade 4 class wanted to know how long bees have been around with us. And I remember reading that bees and dinosaurs lived together around the same time. So we have the fossil records, of course. Okay, glad you can hear us. We have the fossil records, of course, and they have dated the presence of bees back so I mean, like beyond 35 million years ago. So bees have been around for a long time. While not technically a dinosaur, they're one of the creatures that lived during that time and possibly longer. What a great question. Thank you, Karina.
yeah, it's fun to think about it. Like one species staying around that long, eh? Like there's not too many that can say that they've done that.
Oh,
And Kaylee has a question leading into our activity this
yeah,
morning.
exactly.
So Kaylee, I'm going to hold on to yours for a second because we will definitely talk about the bee hotel. Um, is grade 4 at BLT is wondering if you know where the bees keep the pollen when they're carrying it to their hive.
Ah,
Yeah, it's kind of different depending on the species, but for some bees, like the honeybee, it's actually gets stuck to their legs. But some other bees, it's more on other parts of their body too. So it would be cool if you guys did some research on how different bees carry the pollen. That would be kind of cool research to do.
we have one more question was about do bees have the same amount of sting?
Mm.
Yeah, so it's only actually the female bees, the worker bees and the queen bee that are able to sting. The other types of bees don't, and I think that for the most part they're all the same amount. And bees are going to be really reluctant to sting you unless they absolutely have to, because they can cause a lot of damage to their body. So definitely there's a difference when it comes to stingy insects such as hornets, wasps, bees. I have never been really apprehensive or afraid of bees because I knowing that as a child growing up that they will only sting if they absolutely feel like they're threatened. While wasps and hornets will sometimes sting you and then chase you and sting you. I mean, and not to scare anybody, but I've had a few experiences, and usually it's not that bad as long as you don't have an allergy. But bees, for the most part, do not sting on a regular basis, and like I said, it's just the female bees that do so.
Yeah, for me personally, I think every time I can remember being stung, it's usually because I'm in my bare feet on the grass and I'll step on,
Yeah.
but they live in the grass, like they live in the
So
ground.
it's
So
not
it's
even
like,
known if they're intentionally trying to sting you. They're just
no,
probably
yeah,
there, and you might just step on them because there is some times where they don't actually survive the after they've stung. So, and some people say that's a myth. I've looked into it quite a bit, and there are times that if a bee stings you, it's really done out of necessity, or if you're like Jeff, you accidentally step on one, it's bound to happen. But
yeah,
great question.
yeah. So this idea of a bee hotel is something that we've done with some other activities with Brilliant Labs. So the big idea is that not because well these honeybees live in these huge hives, but so many of our native bee species do not. They're what we call a solitary bee. They live either by themselves or with just a couple other bees. So this idea of a bee hotel, which I kind of have around beside me that I've started to throw together a little bit, is about helping those species of bees because they don't need to build that massive hive. They just need a hole to crawl in so that they can use some dirt and mud and to make a little closing around it. So those are the bees that we're going to be helping today with what we create with our bee hotel. So
Right.
what do you have to work
I
with there today, Sarah? I'm going to get my camera switched here too.
I have some various sized sticks that I collected from around my property. I have some different types of thickness of cardboard and construction paper, different colors as well. And I also have, I'm using a glass jar to actually build the bee hotel in. Um, Within my studio slash office right now, my jar may have rolled away. If you just excuse me for a moment, I'm going to retrieve it.
So I did some collecting too. So if you haven't had a chance to do this yet, it's the materials are pretty basic. So I just went to my recycling bin and I grabbed a tin can. Like Sarah said, she's using glass. Plastic would be fine too. And I just needed an assortment of sticks that are about the same length as my can. So like this one, for example, I'll just break it so that it's a little bit shorter. And Sarah was mentioning some paper. I like to use like the flyers that come to my house, just some paper that I know is going to end up in the recycling, but it actually hasn't been delivered yet this week. So I'm just using some paper that I have around the house so that I can make these little tubes for the bees to make their home in.
I am back. As I
Nice.
predicted, it rolled across the floor.
You
Luckily, it
found it?
didn't break. Yeah, so I've decided to use a glass jar. I think Jeff, you mentioned you're using a can, um, and it just kind of have to. So the the actual mouth of my jar isn't huge; doesn't have a huge circumference. So I'm going to carefully select which sticks are going to go in there, and I don't want the overhang to be so great. So I'm actually going to break them
Yeah.
by hand. If you are trying to break up. My sticks are fairly dry and easy for me to break, but if you're looking to do something that is wetter and has more moisture, so you'd have to actually cut it, you definitely want to get the help of an adult to do so because, I mean, even snapping sticks and twigs in the past doing this, I have gotten a splinter. So we just want to be really aware of those safety things. And I'm
So,
not,
oh no,
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you.
I just wasn't sure the ratio for like I haven't done this in a while. How many sticks I need compared to a my paper tube. So I'm just going to kind of guesstimate this time, and then I'll go from there.
That would actually be kind of an interesting thing to do if you could make more than one bee hotel. Do the bees prefer it when there's only a couple tubes inside? Or is it okay with
Yeah.
them if there's a whole bunch of homes all next to each other? That would be
Well, I
interesting
think
to find out.
as usual, you and I have taken a little bit of a different approach. We don't always discuss what we're going to do ahead of time and just kind of come up with different things. So it always gives us a little bit of a variance to do our experiments with, and then we love and enjoy hearing from everybody at home and from fellow students what they're doing and what worked and what didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no recipe for this. You just kind of we have some basic ideas and you guys can totally be creative with how you end up creating yours. And so I was
I
mentioning earlier that the bees, these solitary bees that live by themselves, they like to, in nature, crawl into a small hole. Like maybe it's a hole that was made by an insect or a woodpecker or something into a tree, or maybe a small hole in the ground. So we're trying to replicate that with our bee hotel by giving them inside maybe a paper tube, or is that what you're working with too there, Sarah? You have some cardstock or
yeah,
something?
I am using. So I was just wondering if you're using the same color paper. Are you using white or
I have white here. That's what I have. Yeah.
perfect? Okay, so I'm gonna see. I don't know how much of the blue they're gonna see, but I'm gonna put that in there. And maybe they don't like, even though they like flowers and bright things to retrieve their pollen. Maybe they don't like the bright color. We'll find out. But I am just using my one of my twigs here to kind of give me a something to roll it around,
Yeah,
and then I'm using some tape.
perfect. I'm doing similar. I've got a pencil that I'm rolling my paper around and just making a little tube and then taping it closed, and then it's ready to go. I can cut it to size so it fits into the jar.
I guess we have to be aware of how big we make the hole for the bee to go into. So we don't want it to be tiny, tiny. Um, so that's another interesting thing. I'm going to do a couple of different size tubes here with different size circumference and diameter so that we can see if there's, I don't want my bee to get stuck in there where it's not, it's going to be paper and a bit more rigid than the dirt in the ground. I will be checking on it. And if we have a little buzzy in there and he gets stuck, then I will make sure that I figure something out.
We just had a question in the chat. Miss Ross's class is asking if bees can be a pet. I think if your definition of a pet is that they live outside on your property, I think you could your bee hotel could totally be, you could think of it as if they're your yard pets, I guess. Keep it outside though.
Yeah, I think that when it comes down to actually, I think there is a law in Nova Scotia that protects all wildlife, whether that be a squirrel, a raccoon, or a bee, that we're not actually allowed to keep them as pets. Some people, if they find something that's injured, will take it in and either care for it themselves and then release back into the wild, or send to an organization such as Hope for Wildlife. I don't think they accept injured bees, maybe like a whole hive, but you're not technically supposed to keep a bee as a. And I don't think if I was a bee, I want to be kept away from my hive, or at least my duties to support my hive.
Yeah, great point.
And it turns out that the thicker paper, the cardstock that I had, really is a little bit too hard to roll. So I'm going to stick with my construction paper this time around.
I just have printer paper and it seems to be working pretty good.
Great.
I am being careful to make sure that they're kind of inside the can. I'm just kind of picturing if it rains outside.
Uh-huh.
I don't want the water to be touching these tubes immediately. So like they're kind of going to be
I know. So
inside.
maybe even, yeah. So I see what you mean if we were to trim the little excess that hangs over.
Yeah.
Now, which are you going to be laying this off to our side, right, Jeff? When we put it outside, we're going to have it tilted
Yeah.
over rather than up and down, or?
Yeah, you're right. And I was trying to picture as well how to attach it. And I had a couple ideas that I'm not sure which one will work best. Because I don't know if it would bother the bees if it was like swinging on a string. But because I'm using a tin can, I could technically put a hole through the bottom. So I was almost thinking I could use my drill. So for you guys, you could get a help from an adult, and I could put a screw straight through the bottom of that can into something like maybe the side of a fence or into
Yeah,
an
I was
established
thinking
tree or
of
something. But
resting it, kind of nudging it, maybe even under something that is waterproof. So if you have like a something on your deck or patio, or almost like a little shelf that you could put in there so that it's able to be sturdy but possibly protect it from moisture. Oh wow, lots of questions today. How many eggs do bees lay? Okay, so the queen bee is the bee that lays the eggs, and as she moves through the actual hive, she can lay, I believe it's up 15, over 1,500 to more, up to 2,000 eggs per day, which is pretty amazing. So with her life cycle, you're looking at, upwards of 200,000 eggs for her whole life cycle.
yeah, that's crazy.
I
That's
know.
a lot of bees. We met with a beekeeper yesterday in one of our other
Yeah.
sessions, and he was saying that on his farm at any given time, his number was 40,000 bees, wasn't it, Sarah?
Yeah, it was
He had 40,000 bees on
40,000
his
bees.
property.
Now, if anybody has an allergy to bees, I'm sure that would be a little bit nerve wracking, but um, that's a lot. That was a lot more than I imagined there would be.
Just being conscious of our time here. I know it's
Yes,
9:30, so
yes.
some of these questions are really good, and I know you guys could find the answer with a bit of research too.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss any here though. Miss Ross's class was asking about a king bee. That's not a role in the bee
No,
world.
that's
They
a great
have a
question. I wondered that a
yeah.
while back. No, so the king bee, yeah, like you said, Jeff, there is not such thing as a king bee. It's always a queen, and it's usually just one queen per hive. But if a queen dies, then they actually create a special sac or a special area for a new queen to be grown. But that
Oh,
being said, we have a lot of questions. If you would like to ask us on Twitter and tag Jeff or myself, and also share, any research that you might have come up with your teacher, and they can post it if they're on social media. We would love to hear that.
yeah, absolutely. Like at Miss Graham's class, asking about how bees communicate with each other. It's actually like a fascinating topic. If you do some research into, because they totally do. They have some really interesting ways of communicating. So Miss Graham's class, if it's okay, I'm going to leave you guys to dig into that, find some videos about it, or do some reading. There's a ton of really cool stuff about that.
For sure.
Um,
We had a question about whether I think I saw something there about the bee hotel. What will the bees do in the hotel? Well, that's a very good question. I have made one before, but I didn't end up putting it outside. So I have a few predictions or hypothesis and science of what they may do. I'm hoping that they may treat it as a small hive. I'm not sure of that. I think it might just be a place of shelter where they would go and rest during the colder, darker evening hours. But that's something that we really love to ask and then observe and share. What do you think the bees are going to do in their bee hotel? These are great questions, and there's a
Yeah.
wealth of knowledge out there on the internet if you wanted to Google and then make your prediction of what you think will happen, and then look at your bee hotel and then make some observations if you had like a nature journal or a science journal and write them down each day.
Miss Wheaton's class had a question that I actually meant to ask or answer, so thank you, Miss Wheaton. They were asking, what's the point of the sticks in this? And my best answer is there's two good reasons I can think of. One being that it helps fill the cup, but two, it gives the bee like a landmark, something to identify so that they can find their home again more easily. So they know what they're looking for because they can like picture where like their home is the one next to the really thick stick kind of thing. So it just gives them a landmark to help them identify their home.
It does, and it also provides a bit of camouflage so that it does look like where it's a man-made. Having the presence of sticks and organic matter and things from outside, and you're going to put it outside, it really gives it, except for my bright color. I'm now second guessing that, although that may help with the landmark. That would give them a little bit more of a hiding kind of safe space to have the sticks because it's so common to find them outside. So a few different reasons there.
Yeah. I hope we didn't miss any. Miss Dow's class was asking about how do they collect the honey and make it smooth? Yeah, great question. So there is the process of making honey is again a very interesting process because it's made from nectar from flowers that the bees actually swallow and bring into their bodies. So without giving too much detail to your class, Ms. Dow, I think that you guys should do some research on that and find out how it goes from something that a bee puts into its little bee body and how it ends up being honey in a jar at my house.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite a process. And the neat thing is that the type of honey, like the color and the flavor of it, really relies on where they get the pollen from. So from one type of flower species to another, it'll change what the honey looks like, whether, like I said, the color, the texture, the flavor. So you can have honey from Nova Scotia with our wildflowers, and then you can have honey from different parts of the world that would be totally different.
Yeah, that is kind of, it would be fun to have like a little honey buffet and like try honey that's made from flowers or honey that's made from blueberry blossoms. And, you know,
Exactly.
I think that'd be kind of fun to kind of compare and see what the flavors and the textures are different depending on where the pollen came from.
I think we have one last question, Jeff. It's from Miss Graham's class, I believe. What is the best way we can help the bees? Excellent question. So doing things like this is a great way. Learning and gaining knowledge about the species and why they're so important for our food chain and all of our crops and just for our ecosystem. Being aware that pesticides, so chemicals that we sometimes use in our lawns and gardens and stuff, are not great for bees. So if there's a way that we could go about that with reducing the amount, as well as planting flowers or like letting wildflowers grow, which are fairly simple, they would then attract more bees and help with that population. There are different ways out there that you can help them. Again, we would love to hear about what you found out would really help the bees, especially in your area.
Yeah, by planting those flowers, we're helping make sure that they have lots of food that they can bring back to their babies, and they can keep pollinating other things, like we were saying about different food sources. So, you know, by helping them keep healthy this year, there are going to be more bees around to help us pollinate food supplies later as well.
Exactly. And there's a lot of people who are beekeepers who have, I think the word is called an apiary when you have a collection of bees. And many of them live throughout the province. So there's some great websites, and you may even have neighbors who keep bees. And I'm sure that they would be more than happy to chat with you about what they do and what they've observed and how they feel that you can help the bees.
Yeah, the beekeeper we were speaking with yesterday, he was actually a local high school teacher in Fall
Yeah,
River.
yeah, he's from Lockview in Fall River there.
All right.
So
What do you
I think
think, Sarah? Should
in
we wrap
consideration
this
of
up and send
time
people on?
here, yeah.
Yeah.
So if we didn't get to your questions, please do feel free to reach out by either email or Twitter or however through the Brilliant Labs website. And but we do encourage you to do a little bit of research. Everybody should have access to Chromebooks throughout the school day. Or somebody may within your family or class, and then take those list of questions and answer those, because these are all super important questions, and we know that these are really fun to learn about. They're very, very important for for ourselves and our ecosystem.
Yeah. Well, this was a ton of fun. I'm excited to get my bee hotel outside and see what happens with it.
Yes,
See if I can
they
attract
look
some
very
bees.
different. So we're gonna have to record our data and then also see how it goes. It's gonna be hard. If I could set up a like a GoPro or a webcam or something on it and see the bees, how many bees come in and out. That'd be great. It'd be something to think about for the future, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm also curious about the placement of it. I wonder if it would be more attracting to bees if it was closer to the ground, or if they would prefer that it was up higher. So lots of things to consider when we're
All kinds of
trying to be
factors.
accommodating for bees.
Exactly. Wow. I think this is a really great session today with a lot of great questions and things that I didn't even consider. So thank you so much for your participation. I hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks for
Don't
coming,
forget to
everybody.
be brilliant.
Hey, there it is.
You knew I was going to do it.
Yeah,
It was coming.
I was hoping you would.